Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams. This is going to be a video about whether I regret decluttering some eyeshadow palettes I decluttered in the past. Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. This video is going to be about 10 palettes that I no longer own, but that I want to discuss in terms of, do I regret this now? Was this a good decision to get rid of them, yes or no? And that's what we're going to be chatting about. So let me know in a comment down below if you've ever regretted decluttering any of your eyeshadow palettes. I would love to know. But before we get into the video, and for the people who might be new here, I would like to introduce myself and tell you a little bit about what I like doing on this channel. My name is Maaike. I live in the Netherlands and I have fair skin with a cool to neutral undertone, and this greatly influences how I feel about makeup. I've been reviewing makeup for more than a decade, and I have quite a no-nonsense approach to makeup as well. I just like going back to old favorites. I love trying out eyeshadow palettes, which is why I declutter quite a few. And I love trying some affordable makeup as well by Essence, Catrice, sometimes a bit of Kiko. So if those are things you might be interested in, then I hope you'd like to stick around. So yes, 10 decluttered eyeshadow palettes that I was like, okay, yeah, we need to discuss these. We really, really do. So some of these were more expensive. Some of them were more affordable. Others were decluttered years ago, others more recently. So there's just a whole host of things here. And some of these I had forgotten I ever owned. So we'll get to that. We'll get to that for sure. So first things first is the Melt Blueprint stack. I still have the palette, so did I really declutter this? Oh well. But I decluttered the palette once the stack once I had the palette. And the Melt Blueprint stack and me, we were never the best of friends. And it started upon arrival. I had ordered it. So if you don't know, like I'll pop pictures up on the screen so you can see what it looked like. But if you don't know what the Melt stacks were, they were little palettes where you had components that click together with a magnet. And that then would like make a little like stack of eyeshadow, which was, you know, pretty cool, but a bit bulky and cumbersome and a bit difficult to store especially if you had quite a few of them. And the Melt Blueprint stack that I had ordered, I think from Beauty Bay, came shattered. I know how to repress a shadow just fine. And it was two of the pretty bronzy brown shimmers, I believe, that actually shattered. But because there were magnets, and like pretty strong magnets, I could barely get the product to go back into the pan so I could repress it. So it was like cursed from the start. Very beautiful palette with some like neutral browns, bronze leaning shades with some blue tones where you had like two really nice brighter blue options and then some like minty bluish green things. So a nicely rounded stack for sure. They had split pans, so you had a matte and a shimmer in every single pan, which was great. And the pans were split. It was like one pan that had two shades in. You did get like two separate ones. So it was a pretty clever one. I used it and then I wanted to show it in a video and I dropped one of them and lost a shade completely. So me and the Blueprint stack just never really got on. So then I got the palette because I already owned the stack. I didn't buy the palette initially. And then I got the palette for free, I think from a friend who had an extra one or didn't want it anymore. And she gifted it to me and I was like, yeah. And then I had the palette and I was like, yeah, then I don't need the stack anymore. Because I do really like the shades. It's like one of those shades, like a palette that's perfect for the summertime because you have those like bronzy, warmer browns and then just really nicely juxtaposes with some of the blues on the lower lash line. It's my favorite look to do with it. So it's not a palette I reach for every single day anyway. So do I regret decluttering the stack? Definitely not. It was a mess right from the start, but I still have the shade, so that's why I don't have to miss it in my collection either. Then we have the Essence Be You Ti Ful palette, and it's this one right here. And this one I kind of like, why did I get rid of it? Because it was a good palette from Essence. Essence can do good eyeshadow, but they are rare. It's like very far between. Like whenever you get new Essence palettes, it's always like a bit of a gamble knowing whether they're going to be good or not. And the Be You Ti Ful palette is one that I've actually traveled with. I remember taking this with me on a trip to London at some point as well. Like, this was a good one. It was a bit boring, but then again, I do like quite boring eyeshadow on myself. And overall, it was a 9-pan that had some really stunning shades in. I do remember that. So the Essence Be You Ti Ful palette, I'm now like, I should have kept it around so I could like compare it to other neutral tone palettes for sure. And to have like some really good Essence palettes around, because that's the thing with Essence, I tend to declutter quite a bit because they just release so much and then they come up with something new and then I don't always love it, but I don't always keep all the old stuff around because you can no longer buy it anyway. So that must have been my reasoning for getting rid of this one, because I think it was around for like a hot minute and then they discontinued it, and then I felt like, what am I going to do with this? Like, I have a million other neutral tone palettes that can give me the same look, so why should I keep this one around? I'm pretty sure that was my reasoning at the time. So do I truly miss it from like a quality or like color story standpoint? No, but it would have been nice to have another like older palette from Essence that is good. Then we have the Morphe and Jaclyn Hill Vault. Who remembers this? Because this was a whole thing. This is when people started like having theories about batches and having good batches and bad batches and all that. The one I received, I have to say, I'm gonna be very honest with you, it was fine. Mine was good quality. However, I do not have any other experience with Morphe shadows than the Jaclyn Hill Vault. I had never purchased Morphe before that. Not the 35-0, no, none of the Jaclyn Hill, Jeffree Star, James, none of the collabs. I never ever bought any of them because they were too big. I don't need 35 pans. They were too samey, like it was so much a gradient that I was like, I'm only going to use like 3 shades in this entire palette. I don't need everything. So I never got into Morphe back when they were like super popular. But then when the Vault was announced, I was like, that's 4 palettes and each one has a color story and it's very curated. So I was like, I want to try Morphe. And as I mentioned, mine were fine. But it's not entirely gone exactly from my collection. I have to be very honest. Because once I had tried all of these palettes, what I ended up doing is actually the 3 palettes that I didn't love because they were, like, you had a really warm toned one and there was a berry one and there was a third one. I don't remember what the third one did, but then the cool toned one stayed in my collection for a while, but I decluttered that one last year because I was like, I'm no longer reaching for this. I'm not interested in this palette anymore. Yes, it's got a stunning teal, but I have other teals in other palettes that I like just as much, so I didn't need to keep it around anymore because I felt other things in my collection had replaced it. But of the other 3 palettes, I actually took shades out and repressed them either as part of my singles collection or as part of some of my ColourPop palettes. There are hidden Morphe Jaclyn Hill Vault shades, and I believe I kept one of the reddish tone shade from the warm tone palette and I kept one of the berry shades as well. So somewhere in my warm and purple palettes from ColourPop, there are 2 or 3 Jaclyn Hill Vault shades for sure. I have a video up where I actually did that, like where I put everything together. So I can link that down below if I can still find it. But yeah, most of them were taken out, at least the shades I did like, and I decluttered the rest. Don't regret it. Another thing that's kind of a regret, but not really, and I don't know whether for sure whether I have mentioned this before or not, because part of my brain is like, I think I mentioned this, but it wasn't ticked off my list. So then I was like, might as well, like I keep a list of all of the cluttered palettes now so that I can like know what to feature in these videos. But yeah, the Catrice Yellow Submagreen. This was a quad. It had 3 greens and a yellow, which for the time this came out from Catrice and the quality it had, it was revolutionary because I don't think Catrice has ever done anything like this, which is why this was in my collection for years. I know I did a video, like I did a blog post when I first bought this must have been something like 2011, 2012, like way back in the day. And I think I didn't get rid of it until like 2022. Like this was in my collection for a decade. And I got rid of it because I just wasn't using it. I have these greens a million times over. But just the idea, the name did it for me as well. Yellow Submagreen, like who doesn't love a Beatles reference? And then you had those three greens with the yellow. It was always a little bit different, a little bit special. I ended up decluttering it, and now part of me is like, oh, but that was another example of like a really good Catrice product. Why did I get rid of this? But yeah, I can't keep all the makeup that I ever liked in my lifetime. So, because then I would need an extra storage unit just to house all of that makeup, which we're not going to do. We're going to keep things like, I like to have an overview in my collection. I like to not keep everything. And I have I have a makeup memory box where I keep like older makeup that has special packaging or a special meaning to me for sure. So I have a box where I keep some of these things. But I've even decluttered that in the past because there was just too much. And I was like, I'm not going to hang on to all of this. Like once it gets beyond a certain point, I just know I need to get rid of this. Another Essence thing, there's actually 3 Essence things on the list, but Essence, my must-haves. This wasn't even a palette that you could buy as is. Essence at some point came out with its own sort of system where you could buy the empty palette and then put the shades in. And it wasn't just eyeshadow, because they also did bronzers and blushes and highlighters. So you could turn it into like a shadow with a face product, or you could do an entire shadow palette, whatever. It was just that within this line, not all of the shades were created equal, but it had a couple of stunner of shades, which happened to be the 4 I picked. So I bought a little 4 pan, bought 4 shadows to go with it. And this is another thing that just lived in my collection for such a long time that it sort of like became part of it. It was just automatically, I wouldn't even like clock that it was there, but it was there. You know what I mean? Like if something, it's like one of those things when you have house plants or something and then you move them around, that's when you start to feel strange. It was a bit like that with this Essence palette because it was around for a while. It had a really nice bronzy brown, I believe. I think I had this mauve tone in it that I also really adored. But like with the other Essence palette, this just didn't stand out in the sea of makeup that I already own. So that's why I was like, I don't need this in my life anymore. So do I regret decluttering it from like a usability standpoint? Definitely not, because I have plenty of makeup that I probably like a lot better than this Essence thing. But still, this Essence thing was one of the best things I ever tried by them. I'm not going to lie. Again, an Essence product that, you know, maybe for comparison's sake would have been nice to still own. I also want to feature some things that aren't Essence and Catrice because I just try so much by them and not all of it is good, as I mentioned. So that's why a lot of Essence and Catrice, like, I'm pretty sure I can do a dedicated video at some point with just Essence and Catrice because it's a lot. But sometimes I like look at the names of the palettes and I'm like, what palette was that? Like, I don't even remember what it looked like. But we have the Balm Nude Dude. I've decluttered all of my The Balm palettes by now, and they're just a brand that I feel really had their moment, but they were a little inconsistent and just a little behind on the times, I feel. So they had the cute packaging that really went for them. And by the time the Nude Dude came around, I'm sure people were just over it. It was essentially a darker version of the Naked 3. And I loved my Naked 3, which is why I like the Nude Dude. And I kept it around for years, but same as with the Essence and Catrice stuff that I just talked about. This was just sitting in my collection. I wasn't using it because if I went for that rosy toned kind of thing, I would go for my Naked 3 at the time. So I would always be reaching for other things over this one. Even though it had really fun packaging, I didn't really quite need this. I think I still have one The Balm palette just to have it around. The first one I ever bought, which was the Nude. We can mention, I can mention that in a future video before, but yeah, the Nude Dude and also the Nude Beach, I just never used as much as I did the Nude Dude to begin with, so that's why the Nude Dude was an easy declutter for me, and there are so many rosy tone palettes that this just wasn't special enough. Rosé in the Air from Wet n Wild. Anyone who remembers Wet n Wild doing this? I think there's, again, doing different layouts by now. But I remember this was huge because Wet n Wild revamped their eyeshadow palettes, so the Comfort Zone, and those palettes went away. And then we got this style to replace it. And this was the one that people called a dupe for the Anastasia Beverly Hills Modern Renaissance. And you can just tell the color story is pretty much the same, only you get fewer shades, I believe. Because the Anastasia Beverly Hills 14, I think these were 10 pans, if I'm not mistaken. And I was never a huge fan of the Modern Renaissance to begin with. By now, I've decluttered that one as well. But I've reorganized it and kept some of the shades that I did like from it. But yeah, this was just a drugstore version, and I wanted to try it. Wet n Wild is a brand I want to love, but it's so difficult for me to find. And if I find it, it's twice as expensive as it is in the US. And then I feel that if I look at the price point and the quality, Wet n Wild isn't always quite like worth it to me. It just doesn't really live up to the hype. And I know Wet n Wild redid their eyeshadows since then, and I just haven't heard really good things about it. So I'm not really missing this in my collection at all. This is one of the palettes I was like, oh yeah, I used to own that at some point. I picked it up, I think, on a trip to the US at some point. Or did I buy this online? Don't remember. Don't even remember how it got into my collection. Another thing, I don't even remember how I acquired it or like owning it, was the Marc Jacobs The Starlet. That's the one I had. Marc Jacobs as a brand, of course, no longer available, but there are rumors that they will be back in 2025. So Marc Jacobs was much raved about as a brand. Their bronzers were like so hyped up. I think their lip liners as well. They had a primer everybody went gaga for. And they had these really cute little, like, was it 6 or 7 or 5 pans? Like these little like long oval shaped palettes. And this was one of the brands that whenever I went abroad, I would check it out because Marc Jacobs, everybody was talking about it. But it was, again, very difficult for me to buy. So I didn't really know what to get from it. Because I could only like look at it in a store whenever I was like, I think I bought one in Paris, I think Sephora Paris carry them, I think. So I may have picked it up there, or maybe, I don't know. I really don't remember where I got this. But essentially the one I picked up was just not a good fit for me. It was all metallics, and they were not shades that necessarily went together. So I kept this around in a makeup memory box for a long time because it was tied to like a trip or something. I do remember that. But it was just one where I was like, I was going through the list and I was like, oh yeah, that little Marc Jacobs thing, I used to own it. But I just, for how expensive that was, I just didn't really get the hype. And I haven't really tried a lot of Marc Jacobs as a result because I was just like, nah, this is okay. But it's nothing to write home about. That's literally how I felt about this palette, even when the brand was still available. So I've never really much made a point of trying it. So maybe if they come back, I might like it better. I don't know. But yeah, I don't miss this one at all. And then this little guy from Essence, the Hello Autumn. And if I remember correctly, it was like a clear packaged palette with some, like, I think 8 pans of like browns and greens, if I'm not mistaken, if I have the right one in my head. Maybe if I pop the picture up on the screen, it's completely different. But the Hello Autumn, this is one of the palettes that made me realize that if I wrote about Essence and Catrice stuff on my website, on my blog, that it would get views. This is one of the things that started to climb really well in my stats. So it gets props for that, but this wasn't really anything special. It was a cute collection though. But Essence and Catrice, again, on top of the regular updates they do every 6 months. In fact, the Catrice one is being dropped at retailers as we speak. I just haven't found a retailer that has everything in stock. So once I find enough products in stock, then I'm going to buy everything and do a video with it. But I'm not sure if I can do it within like the next week or two. I hope so. I hope to be able to buy most of the products at the start of next week as you're watching this. So then we'll see what Catrice has on offer again, and then Essence will come a little bit later. But on top of that, they actually also do these limited edition collections. Like, it used to be every 6 weeks. I think they've slowed down a little, but just Essence and Catrice just bring out so much new product that it can be difficult to like really hone in on what's actually good, which is why I do the video, so you don't have to. But yeah, they're limited editions I haven't really been interested in for a while. Back in the day, I would buy them a lot more often, but with those limited edition collections, it's like it's bloop and it's gone. And very often things go on sale now as well. There's just not the same sort of demand for an Essence limited edition collection as there was like 7 years ago, or even upon recently. Like, they haven't really innovated anything within those collections. Like, if they were to do something that was actually good, then I might still be interested. Like, the Catrice Fallen Colors was like a gem. So I sometimes find something that like stands out to me and that I want to try, then I try it. But those limited edition collections, it's just 13 to a dozen, as we would say in Dutch. And then finally, the last palette I want to mention here is the Maybelline The Blushed Nudes. So yes, Maybelline had palettes, and I think they still do these. Like, I'm not sure. I haven't seen a Maybelline palette in a while. I haven't really looked into their eyeshadow. Because Maybelline eyeshadow, it's like one of those things where they've never really shone. Like, they've never really been the brightest star in the drugstore when it comes to eyeshadow. They just never have. Same with L'Oreal. Like, L'Oreal had those singles in like the little pots with the stopper. Those were good, but those were discontinued years ago over here. I think in the US you can still buy those. But Maybelline, in terms of eyeshadow, nah. Like, the only reason why this got hype was because Maybelline had a palette. That was the hype. And they've done other palettes since then that have gotten a little bit of hype, or at least I've heard people saying that they were good. It's just that a lot of times those things never made it to Europe, at least not where I live. Very often, if we get Maybelline products that are happening in the US, we get them like a year late, and we never get the full shade range, and like, it's a whole thing. I'm super frustrated with Maybelline as a brand, which is why I never really check them out. Like, the only thing I buy from them consistently is mascara, because Maybelline mascaras are like some of my favorites. So they are like a brand I do check out from time to time, but not for eyeshadow, and I definitely do not miss this. This was a dud of a palette, so I'm glad it's gone. So yes, thank you so much for being here today. That's the end of the video. Those were all the palettes I want to discuss with you today. Yeah, I don't think I truly regret many of the declutters I've ever done, and if I have decluttered something in the past, it may still be in a makeup memory box at times as well. There are certain things I really cannot get rid of, and if I know that, it goes into the makeup memory box. But these things that are long gone, like I mentioned, some of these I had even forgotten I ever had in my collection. So then you know you're good, you know? So yeah, so overall, I do not regret many of the things I've decluttered, which I think is great to see. And with that being said, I really hope you enjoyed watching this video today. Thumbs up the video if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more by me. I do this video once a month, but I make regular eyeshadow palette content. So if you'd like to stay tuned for more, and then I hope to see you in my next one. Bye-bye.